Here we're going to look at some function notation. So if y is actually a function, then you can write it as f of x. So this sentence here would be read as y equals f of x. So f is the name of the function, which can change. So it could be h of x, g of x. We can see different names of functions. But y is the output or the dependent variable, and it depends on whatever x, the independent variable, is that you are plugging in. So we always have that the output equals f of the input. That means you get out the dependent variable because what you get out depends on what you put in your independent variable. So y equals f of x. That tells me y is the output and x is the input. Y is dependent, x is independent. So one way of writing an equation could just be y equals 3x plus 1, but since this is a function, we can also call it f of x equals 3x plus 1. So f of x is the same thing as y. Remember, y equals f of x. So a common error when you're reading this, f of x does not mean f times x. It means f evaluated at x. F of x doesn't mean multiplication. We'll see this when we look at this first example here. We have the function f of x equals x squared minus 5x plus 2 over x plus 10. We're going to evaluate and simplify the following. So first thing we're going to do is f of negative 10. That means replace all x's with negative 10s. And it's going to be in parentheses. So we're going to go to each spot where we see an x, and we're going to put a negative 10 in there in parentheses, because instead of having an f of x, we have f of negative 10. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to do, instead of x squared in the first term, it's going to be negative 10 squared. The second term is negative 5 times x, so I'm going to replace that x with a negative 10. And then this last term is a plus 2. It doesn't have an x on it, so I don't need to put a negative 10 in parentheses there. And then in the bottom, I'm going to replace that x plus 10 with a negative 10 plus 10. So going in each spot, there were 3, 1, 2, 3 places I should have put a negative 10 in parentheses. That looks good. And then I can just grab my calculator and plug in each of these pieces. So first of all, I have negative 10 squared. So I'm going to enter in that top exactly like that. So I'm going to grab my calculator, do parentheses, negative 10 squared. I have minus 5, and I'm going to do parentheses, negative 10 plus 2. I'm just going to plug in the top. That's plenty to plug in. And you should get 152. So take a moment, pause the video if you have to, plug in on your calculator, make sure you get the same thing. And then in the bottom, I'm going to enter it in just like that. I'm going to do parentheses negative 10 plus 10, which is going to be 0. So all together, when I go to plug this in on my calculator, I'm getting 152 divided by 0, and my calculator says error, divide by 0. That means this is undefined, because you divide by 0, you get an undefined answer. So kind of a weird one to start with. Let's try plugging in something else. So let's look at f of 2. That means we're going to replace all x's with, in parentheses, a 2. And that's going to work for our calculator. So this first x is x squared. So I'm going to do parentheses 2 squared. My second term is a minus 5x. I'm going to do minus 5, and instead of writing x, I'm going to put a parentheses and put a 2 in there. Plus a 2 at the end. That comes from this original function. That last term is just a plus 2. It doesn't have an x on it. So we're good with plugging into the top. And we're going to put it all over. We're going to replace this first x with a 2 plus 10. So now I can grab my calculator, and I'm just going to plug in the top first. So I'm going to do parentheses 2 squared minus 5 parentheses 2 plus 2. So grab your calculator and try that. you should get negative 4. And then I'm getting 2 plus 10 in the denominator is 12. Now to see if I can simplify this, I'm going to go in on my graphing calculator and do negative 4 divided by 12, and it's giving me this crazy fraction. Crazy decimal that doesn't stop. It's negative 0.3 repeating. So when I get this crazy decimal, I want to make it into a nice fraction. So I'm going to hit math, enter, and then enter again on my graphing calculator. So I have negative 0.3 repeating and it's all crazy. I'm gonna hit the math button. It's the third one down on the left. So top left, you have a y equals a second, an alpha, and then it's math. And then you just hit enter and then enter again. And it reduces to be negative 1/3. There's my simplified answer. All right, and then my last one here is f of c minus 4. So I'm going to go into this function and replace all x's. Replace all x's with a parenthesis c minus 4. So instead of just replacing it with a number, we're going to replace it with a c minus 4. So my first term was x squared. So I'm going to do c minus 4 squared. I have minus 5, and it's supposed to be times x, so I'm going to replace it with a c minus 4. And then the last part of the top was just a regular plus 2. Then in the bottom, I have c minus 4 plus 10. All right, this is going to take some work to try to simplify. So I'm going to take it piece by piece. So the first piece that I'm going to look at is this c minus 4 squared, and I'm going to do some side work. So something squared means it's multiplied by itself, right? 5 squared is 5 times 5, 2 squared is 2 times 2, 6 squared is 6 times 6. So c minus 4 squared is going to be c minus 4 times c minus 4. So I need to distribute here, so I'm going to do some foiling. So my first term, c times c is c squared. And then my outer terms is going to be c times negative 4, which is going to be negative 4c. My inner term is going to be negative 4 times c, which is going to be negative 4c. And then my last term, negative 4 times negative 4 is a positive 16. So this ends up being c squared, and then negative 4 minus 4, you can use your calculator, negative 4 minus 4 is going to be negative 8c plus 16. Okay, our next piece is a minus 5 times c minus 4. So we need to do some side work for that too. So you have minus 5 times c minus 4. And we're going to distribute here. So minus 5 times c is going to be a minus 5c. And then we have minus 5 times the minus 4 is a positive 20. And then this whole numerator ends with a plus 2. So I'm just going to put a plus 2 on here. So we really have c squared minus 8c plus 16 from the first term. And then we had minus 5c plus 20 plus 2 from that second and the third term. So we can try to combine any like terms and put our answer in up for the numerator. So as far as the c squared term, there's only one c squared. So that one's good to go. For the c terms, we have minus 8 and then we have minus 5. So I'm going to grab my calculator and do minus 8 and subtract 5 from that. And that's going to bring us down to negative 13c. So we combine those terms. And then for our number at the end, we had 16 plus 20 plus 2. So I'm going to grab my calculator and do 16 plus 20 plus 2 is a plus 38. And that's all over the denominator. I need to see if I can do some side work for that. I have c minus 4 plus 10. So when I go to combine like terms, I just have one c down here. And then I have negative 4 plus 10, which is going to be 10 minus 4 is 6. Or you plug it into your calculator. -4 plus 10. And there's my final answer.